Right, I'd now like to introduce today's speaker, who is Peter Henley. Peter is a principal consultant for the WRC Infrastructure Solutions team, and they specialise in sewerage operations and wastewater issues. He's been in the wastewater industry for over 32 years, working as a contractor, consultant, and for the strategic planning team of Wessex Water. And he was there before he joined WRC in 2009. He's got an extensive background in sewer flow surveys, CCTV inspection, sewer rehabilitation and asset management. And he's also been involved in the production of various WRC publications, such as the Drain Repair Book, the Manual of Sewer Condition Classification, and versions of Sewers for Adoption, and is currently working on the new edition of the Sewer Risk Management Guide. And he's also represented WRC on various national committees covering drainage issues, and currently sits on the NADC Technical Committee. So without further ado, I'd like to now hand over to Peter to give us his presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Norman. That's much appreciated. Yes, greetings everybody, and welcome to this talk. It's probably an apt time to be discussing overflow spills. They currently seem to be in the news fairly commonly. So I'm just going to try and cover some of the key aspects around how do we look to reduce overflow spills, but don't go against some of our net zero gains or targets, certainly. So as I've said, CSO spills, I classify it as the perfect storm, I think, for the water companies at the moment. All factors seem against them. So whether it's dealing with an aging network, long-standing issues, probably a whole period of underinvestment within the wastewater network, I would suggest. But I think that's going to change over the next, certainly next few AMP periods, as we try and address some of the issues that are causing these CSO spills. In the UK, and particularly in the north of the UK, there's a high proportion of combined sewers. So I'm currently in Northumbria at the Northumbria Water Innovation Festival. And they've got 85% of their sewer network is combined. So therefore, the combined storm overflow problem for them and companies such as Yorkshire Water and United Utilities are particularly of interest. Compare that with Thames Water, where they've only got, say, 14% of their network is combined. So it does show that there's a bit of an imbalance between the across the country in terms of numbers of CSOs, and therefore obviously the investment required to tackle some of the issues. We're obviously facing increasing populations, so therefore there's a greater demand on our sewerage network, and we're also looking therefore to improve performance as we manage ever increasing flows. So it's a bit of a challenge for the water industry. We're also facing the ever increasing threat from climate change. Extreme weather events will inevitably put greater strains and stresses on our wastewater systems. So combined with increased flows from population, those extreme weather events in combined sewers will inevitably cause increased flows, greater potential for risk of overflow spills. So it's a problem that we're increasingly facing. And urban creep, the growth of extensions, conservatories, hard standing outside of fronts of buildings, etc., for parking cars, is increasingly removing permeable areas and replacing them with impermeable. So we have increasing the runoff from our hard standing, our buildings and around grounds around the building. So therefore that urban creep is certainly increasing the rapid response to storm events. So therefore it's putting a greater strain on our already stressed our wastewater network. So we have to consider and look at the impact of urban creep on our CSO spills, and this all adds to the ever increasing storm that the water companies are facing, and that manifests itself in what I think the water companies, and having had numerous conversations while I've been up here at the festival, there's that lack of public trust with the water companies, and the news agenda seems to be stacked against the water companies. However hard they try, the comments around dumping or pumping sewage into our rivers and seas is a message that's out there, and it's a hard one to break and hard one to change. So I know the festival here is about citizens, and how do we change that perception of customers into citizens, where they can contribute to reducing some of the impacts of the storm overflow problem, be that what they flush and etc., reducing use of the water, etc. So we need to try and change and address that change in that lack of trust in the water companies. How we do that, it's going to be a long and slow process, I suggest, but it's one that I know they're actively looking at to try and solve. There's also, I would suggest, a large amount of misinformation. As I mentioned, the pumping or dumping of sewage into rivers and waterways is not something the water companies look to do. They're looking, obviously they have issues that they're looking to address, and they recognise that. And I think they recognise that potentially in the past they probably haven't put enough focus on this. But the misinformation out there is a significant problem, and that just leads to that mistrust in the water companies. So how do we address that as an industry? I think that's a big challenge. We need to change the narrative a little bit. I suggest we need to accept there is a problem. I think we need to then work together, and I think this is the idea around the citizenship. We're in this problem together. We need to solve it together. The public can't just expect the water companies to solve the issue overnight, and I think we need to change the narrative a little bit, that the water companies are the sole people who can change this. I was listening to a talk from the EA earlier this week, and they were saying that the impact of CSOs causes around about 15% of pollution incidents. So that's a relatively small number. However, the tales in the newspapers, the press, etc., seems to purely focus on the CSO issue. So I think that's something we need to try and change that misinformation and change the narrative slightly. So I think we're all in this together, and we need to work hard as citizens to try and change that. You can tell I've been on brand all of this week. And inevitably, as the public knowledge of the CSO problem increases, and the likes of Fergal Sharkey have been banging the drum, so to speak, it's increased political focus. Whether that's a good thing or not is probably a moot point. However, it's becoming a political weapon. The government are under pressure to demonstrate they're doing something about this problem. And also the opposition parties are seeking to gain advantage from this, which is probably not the right approach, I suggest. I don't think this is a political issue. I think we need to tackle this, as I say, as a group of citizens, to try and change how we address this and work together to find out how we can adapt and modify our sewer network over a period of time. It's not an overnight solution, to make sure we can solve some of this problem. And then obviously we're facing a cost of living crisis. I've seen in the press that water companies are looking to increase charges by 40%. Water bills are not a significant, well, they are a significant issue if you're suffering at this current time with increasing mortgage rates, energy bills, etc. So a 40% increase is going to be of impact on that sector. So if we're looking to address this issue, we're looking to solve the problem, that will inevitably lead to greater investment in our sewer networks. So how do we manage that, and how do we manage that process? of combining that. So, as I say, all of these factors suddenly seem to have centred on this issue, and it's going to be a tricky one to solve. So yes, so it's we were discussing how the water utilities are facing basically a trilemma, and they've got an aging network, as I've said, on one side, so they've got to look to invest in that network, to maintain it, to improve it, renovate it where necessary, and then you've got to maintain standards and improve standards. So that's the other side of the triangle. And then you've got the affordability aspect. So how do you balance all of those three key factors in that trilemma? So it's a bit of a challenge for the water industry, I suggest, going forward. And how do we navigate our way through this perfect storm? So, as I say, ever increasing political pressure to address that. So the Environment Act, of 2021 has really set out to the water industry that they need to improve all of their overflows, and particularly where they have an impact on bathing waters, etc. So that's not just coastal, but now ever increasingly inland bathing waters, and that's going to be a big challenge going forward. So they need to improve those sites by 75% of those sites by 2035, which, that is a very quite short time horizon to address some of those issues. And certainly then by 2050, there'll be no storm overflows will be permitted to operate outside of unusually heavy rain, or to cause any adverse ecological harm. So the clock is ticking. The pressure there, and I don't foresee any of the other parties, if they ever come into power, will be able to change that. There's this set now as that direction of travel. We need to address the overflow issue, and we need to solve it. So yeah, so looking at CSO spills, they will be limited to 10 spills per year, and no more than 3 per at each site discharging to any bathing area. And then particularly during bathing seasons, that's going to be limited to 2. So that's quite an onerous challenge for the water industry. There is, and having had various discussions this week around what is the impact of storm overflows, and I've said the EA recognise that they probably potentially only cause around 15% of pollution incidents. Should we be looking at more of the impact of a storm overflow spill rather than numbers of? And I know that's probably something where the politicians need to potentially get their heads around this issue. Is an arbitrary number of, say, 10 spills, is that really going to be beneficial, or are we should be really focusing on the impact of a spill and how do we negate that or mitigate against that? So yes, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion around the whether we're looking at just numeric values of spills, or is it what is the harm that is caused by a CSO spill. So the Environment Act really does set out a timeline. The clock is ticking, as I say, and the water companies now are really focusing on how do they solve this problem in the next 10, 15, 20 years. So yes, that's going to be a real problem. So that's going to be embedded in DWMPs, etc., their drainage water management plans, and WINEP, etc. So they've got steps in place, and I think they're now focusing their attentions on how to address some of these issues that are going to make it regulation that they're going to have to conform to. And as I say, this presents a huge challenge for the sector. It's going to see an increase in expenditure in the water sector from around the 1 billion mark to certainly 3 billion over the next few periods. So that's going to be a challenge. How do we manage that, and how do we factor that in? As I've said, I'm currently at the Northumbrian Water Innovation Festival, and for the last 3 days I've been joining a sprint where we've been what is called SOS, Smart Optimised Sewers, and this is around how do we identify innovation in a particular catchment in this area. And there's been a large interest from other water companies present at the event. The supply chain have been here, innovators, problem solvers are all involved in this discussion, and we've been trying to map out and understand the problem at this innovation festival. I don't think we've found many silver bullets. So I think we're trying to move things forward. But certainly Northumbrians' view and the target of this sprint that I've been involved with is what can we do in the next 12 months? The water companies, I believe, and certainly the view that they're expressing is they need to get moving on this. So they're looking for what can we do in the next 12 months in this particular catchment. It's one where they have a large number of spills on a regular basis, and they're looking to say, what can we do to try and reduce those numbers? We need to demonstrate to our customers that we're investing our money now ahead of the next AMP period, that we are actively looking now to roll out innovation solutions that in this particular catchment that they then can use and adapt and change to all other catchments in their area to really drive down those numbers. So I think that they see the next 12 months as a period where they can look at innovation, test it, trial it, involve the customer, the citizen, as we should say. And how do we get those people involved and really up the game around citizenship and stakeholder engagement? Because, as I say, the water companies are not acting on their own in this. They need everybody's involvement and buy-in to move things forward. So it's very apt that I'm doing this talk at the Innovation Festival, talking about trying to identify innovation in this space. So it's a great, exciting time to be in here. We've had lots of ideas. We're currently trying to put them into a shape that we can present to the Northumbrian Water Board tomorrow. And that's going to be spread much wider into the whole of the UK water sector. So hopefully some of the innovations that we've identified could be arriving very shortly soon. I can't talk about them too much because obviously it's, we're still finalising things, but certainly the idea is to present most of those ideas or the 5 ideas that we've identified to the Northumbrian Water Board tomorrow. They're going to try and invest in the ones that they think are going to have the biggest impact in this catchment and also other catchments within the Northumbrian water area. And I'm sure that's going to filter out to the other water companies who are actively looking at and have been engaged in this process. So yeah, exciting times. It's been a great event. 1,800 people here. Fantastic to get so much involvement from the supply chain, all of the partners in this sector, to really try and identify some solutions. So what are those solutions? Well, I think we should always start from the and looking through the lens of net zero and reducing our carbon impacts. We've got to remember, and I think this goes back, a colleague said to me, the first, when we were talking about SRM, the sewerage rehabilitation manual and the risk management system now, we've got to remember that our biggest asset is the hole in the ground. So the pipes that we've got, the tanks, the pumping stations, etc., they are our biggest asset. Once we start adding, enlarging, increasing the size of some of those assets, that's when we start to have a real significant carbon impact. So I think we need to make sure that we're making use of our asset, which is the hole in the ground, making sure that we're maximising its potential, we're using it to its fullest. So I think we should always try and remember that that's what we've got in the ground. That's our big asset. So what can we do with that asset and what can we maximise it? So solving the problem. Well, if we're looking to solve things in the short term, we've probably got 2 options. We can go grey, create more storage, etc., or we can go green, blue, or probably in essence, I think there's probably inevitably going to be a mix between the 2. So typically, if we're looking at an accelerated program of investment, I think the temptation would be to go grey. It's often the most simplest, quickest solution. It's a ready-made solution. We've got trusted engineering principles. We can model our network, understand what storage requirements are needed, and then we can start to build those. However, the ever-adapting or the changing climate can create risk in that. If we design our tanks, storage systems, etc., upsizing our pipes, it's fraught with risk of ever-increasing demands of climate change. So we've got to factor that in. And also, as I say, if we're looking to build more and more concrete, put more and more storage into the ground, it's going to have high embodied carbon impacts. So while it could be the quick solution and probably the easy fix, I think most of the water companies accept that it may work in certain situations. It may be the only option they've got in certain situations. However, going grey is not going to really work in terms of how do we draw down or look to approach our carbon impact. So yeah, what are the other options? So I think green, blue, SUD, sustainable urban drainage, surface water separation, etc. It's not an easy fix. It requires a hybrid multi-stakeholder approach at property level, local and catchment level. So that's going to require engagement with a lot of stakeholders. So nothing moves fast in this area, and you've got to get all of those stakeholders, whether it's at customer level, property level, all the way through to local authorities, planning authorities, highways agencies, etc. They all need to buy into this process. So we've got some really good examples in the UK, particularly down in Wales, where they've done a lot of work in this area, where it has been shown to benefit. So I think they're sort of the examples, the case studies that we can use, but we need to build on that. So the green, blue, surface water separation, taking the surface water out of our sewer network is probably the most green option. So we need to look at that and how do we manage that. However, having said that, one of the catchment that we've been discussing here at the festival, one of the areas is, sort of low density population with potential for retrofitting surface water separation. It's quite a combined sewer network in this catchment. However, one of the other sub-catchments is high density, pretty much a concrete jungle, so to speak. So retrofitting green, blue solutions in that area, that's going to be disruptive and can be expensive. So as well, so we've got to really think about that. So yeah, it's an ongoing process, and as I say, it's not a one-stop shop that we can just dip into and solve all our problems using that approach. However, it does bring greater green capital benefits. So whether it's creating an open space and amenity value, increased amenity values, they do bring much more to the public, make the place look a lot nicer, and all of those other green capital benefits associated with that. So it delivers some of those nice add-ons that we really want to do while trying to solve some of the problems. And it has a lower carbon impact. We're not putting concrete into the ground. We're adapting, we're changing, and therefore we're going to have a lower impact. So, that's some of the way we can solve the problem. But I think we're looking for innovation, and I think while I'm sat at the Innovation Festival, I think it would be important to looking at how do we manage our biggest asset. As I say, the asset in the ground is our biggest asset, the hole in the ground, sorry. So we need to look at innovation, and I think this is where we're probably crying out to the supply chain to trying to really feed into this space. It's a growing area, so innovation there is open to everybody, and I think the sector's crying out for it. So we need ever increasing number of water quality sensors to measure impact of CSO spills. So currently, WRC have just won a very successful Ofwat discovery bid. So we're working with the National Composite Centre and Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen to identify sensor technologies that we can put in our CSO storm pipes to try and monitor the impact of that. And I've had numerous conversations this week with water quality sensor developers, be that at university level or more the supply chain, and everybody's keen to help. Everybody's trying to understand that problem. So we're looking at, can we develop low-cost water quality sensors that we can put in the pipe and understand the impact of a CSO spill. The much quoted and much derided figure, around 95% of a spill is reasonably clean water. We need to demonstrate that, and certainly the EA are calling out for that, as we need to have data. We need to demonstrate what is the impact of a CSO spill and what will have that impact have on the water environment. So that's an area where we're looking to develop. So I'll put a call out there. If you've got a good idea, if you've got a good sensor that's reasonably low cost, requires little maintenance, get in touch with WRC. We'd love to chat to you at the moment. So yeah, so we're in that Ofwat Discovery funding bid at the moment. We also need to use greater network sensors to understand our flows into the sewage system. Where do our flows come from? Is it the highways? Is it surface water? Is it infiltration? A lot of our catchments are prone to infiltration into the system. So we need to understand, and how do we tackle that? So the use of sensors in pipe will give us that greater view. So I was listening to a great presentation from Storm Harvester about the work they're doing, utilizing data to look at networks, understand where those flows are coming from, how to tackle them. So yep, they showed me a really interesting graph around increasing flows, CSO spills around groundwater levels increasing. And you could see the increase in CSO spills from that. So that's infiltration. So we're looking at how do we tackle that. It was also interesting that on the downward slope, when groundwater's falling away, we don't seem to have the CSO spill. So why is the upturn in infiltration lead to a spill, but on its downward curve, we don't have the same problem? So yeah, how do we do that? And I know the water companies are talking to WRC about looking at leak tight liners. So when we're looking to use cured in place liners, we need to make sure the systems that we're using and investing in are going to provide a leak tight solution, because infiltration, removing those sources of surface water or groundwater from our sewerage network, is tackled and cut off at source. So yeah, so we need to look at that and understand that. So we're looking for innovation in that space as well. And then smart networks. And I think this is the key point around how do we maximize that hole in the ground, the existing pipe network? How do we manage that capacity? Can we stop the flows? Can we hold them back? Can we retain them in the system using smart networks to control it, to utilize the capacity in our network to prevent some of those CSO spills? And I think this is an area where the water companies are increasingly looking at. Traditionally, we've always been worried about controlling networks, holding back flows, because of the potential to cause flooding issues in other areas or parts of the network. But I think with this challenge, we really need to look at how do we maximize that. And there's been a lot of discussion this week around smart networks. How do we utilize data to understand where our flows are coming from? Where is the capacity in the network? How can we safely hold it back and try and reduce the number of spills we get? And then if we do have a spill, I think the next area of innovation is around the treatment of discharge. So can we treat it? So the image there is around a green solution, and I think that's an area where we need to look at nature-based solutions. Can we deploy them? Can we utilize them in areas where, you know, treatment could be a good step forward? And if we can remove some of the pathogens, some of the impact on the environment, that could be a good way of reintroducing water back into our river-based areas that are probably lacking inflows currently with climate change, etc. So discharges from the sewer network of groundwater, etc., could be beneficial. So we need to look at how do we treat that, and I think nature-based solutions probably do offer the greatest solution there. So reed beds, etc. So that's a bit of a quick summary. I don't think I've come up with many solutions, and I think that's where we need the involvement of the supply chain, people on the call, to really buy into this and trying to get the message out there. This is a problem that's going to be solved by the industry as a whole and by society as a whole. So thank you for listening. Hope it was informative. Like I say, if you need any more information, or you just want to reach out and connect with us, it'd be really appreciated to contact me there on my email address, or just contact WRC, and we'd like to be in touch. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening. Cheers.
Okay, thank you, Peter, for quite a very informative presentation, and yeah, a lot of interesting points for everybody to consider. There are a couple of questions in the chat, and if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. So if we just kick off, the first one's from Dave Chadwick, who says, thinking of what can be done in the next 12 months? Are there any thoughts about the use of water butts to reduce peak flows?
Yes, that's certainly been a topic of conversation within the group, and I think it's that connecting with the public, and I think we should look at that as a potential for creating capacity or attenuation within the system. So yeah, I think water butts, potentially smart water butts. Obviously, if you're rolling out on a large basis, that could have a cost implication. But I think, yeah, the role that a customer or a citizen at a domestic level can play would be very beneficial. So yes, that's something we've definitely discussed.
Yeah.
And also creating that sort of community feel, understanding where your flows go, where your potential CSO spill point is, and what you could do as a citizen to help solve that problem. So creating capacity, storage in your own property area, stop flushing items down the drain and sewer, etc., that could cause blockages. So yeah, I think that's definitely one where we've talked about, and the water companies are taking on board. Yes.
In a let's say a close alternative as well. From me, I was just wondering, what about the promotion of porous surfacing? So when people are putting hard standing down, rather than it being bitmac or something like that, can we use some of this, the sort of porous surfacing to take some of that surface water into the ground?
Yes, certainly. I think planning regulations, building regulations all need to look at address this issue. The use of hard standing, etc., which is increasingly common. We need to factor that in, and definitely, I think we need to sort of push the regulators and the government to try and move in this space. Yeah, we need to think, how do we maximise the use of our water, whether it's grey water recycling. We can incorporate that into new buildings, etc. Retrofitting can be quite difficult, but yeah, I think anything we can do is beneficial. I think Southern Water said if you can remove 40% of surface water, you can remove around about 80% of CSO spills.
Yeah.
So I think that's the target we've got to try and aim for. So where can we do that? Is it a customer level? Is it at much higher levels? So we need to try and aim for that 40%. I think. Yeah.
So the next question, Peter's from Phil Clisham, and he's said to solve these problems, there'll be a need for a significant increase in people with the right skills and knowledge. Some consultancies are seeing a reduction in workload due to the AMP programme coming to an end and may have to lose people to other sectors. What should we be doing to build the skills that we need in that this sector will need?
I probably missed that off the perfect storm. I think the recruitment aspect, the resource, the human resource that we're going to need to do this is going to be critical. We've got people who are approaching retirement. They've probably been in the sector like myself for 30, 40 years. Many of those people are starting to move towards retirement. How do we retain people within the sector? And how do we incorporate that with the vagaries of the AMP period as well? I know Northumbrian with this sort of 12-month challenge that they're looking to kick things off early. So maybe that is a potential way to sort of maximise and to retain people within the sector. And we also need to engage the up-and-coming engineers within the sector. It's difficult to walk into a sector that's toxic, should I say, or has got that negative view. So we do need to try and change that perception a little bit. So, difficult one to solve, Phil. I wish I had the solutions or the ideas. I know WRC are keen to get people in the door as well, and I think we're facing the same challenges as the rest of the sector. So it's a problem that we need to solve, certainly.
And then Phil's followed on with another question. He said, should we pursue arbitrary limits of 10 spills, or should we only work on CSOs that are causing harm?
I think personally, just going on a very arbitrary numeric value of 10 spills, I think it should be much more focused on impact So I think that's the challenge from the EAs. I think to the water companies, they need to provide data. What is the water quality impacts of CSO spills? How do they impact on the environment? And I think that's the way of potentially changing some of the focus from purely numeric values that are probably simple and easy to follow for maybe politicians and the general public, but I think we need to demonstrate that. So, yeah, I would certainly, and I think everybody recognises that the impact is much more important than the numbers of spills. So, you know, certain spills in the winter in a large river environment will not have a huge impact. So, should we focus on removing those spills when impact on a small receiving course in the summer period could have a higher impact on fish life, etc. So, yeah, I think that's where we need to change that approach slightly. Yes, agreed.
So now, you're okay for time? There's about two more questions in the chat. A question from Lance Wadeson, who says, a while ago I saw a program using multispectra sensors on a light aircraft to fly along rivers to identify the point at which pollution enters the river. This quickly identified the polluter. Are there any schemes doing this in the UK, e.g. with drones? I'm not personally aware of it. However, I think it's something that we should be increasingly doing. I think that's recognition of where do the impacts come from. Is it agriculture? Is it highways? Is it from CSOs? Is it from sewage treatment works? I think understanding that in our river environment is the only way we're going to solve the problem. Is that holistic view. We need to understand it better rather than just become knee-jerk reaction, responding to a celebrity on TV or whatever as driving policy. I think by having greater data on an understanding of our catchments, our sewer networks, etc., I think that's the only way we're going to progress, because we can then have an informed choice. You know, just throwing money at a solution is not going to be the right approach if we don't improve the water environment. I think the water companies are fearful that they could invest a huge amount of customer money, increase bills by a significant sum, and then come up with an environment that hasn't been significantly improved. And I think that's where we need to avoid those that. And data is the key to doing that. Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So then we've now got another question from Joanne Hill, who says blue-green solutions are not the norm for water companies, and the shift change in skill set needs implementing within the industry, me included. She says, I personally am just starting on the very first few projects associated in the CSO spill program, putting in temporary solutions for quicker spill reductions whilst working on the permanent solutions. So I guess it's a statement, but
yeah, no, definitely. I think yes, it's the water companies are not used to dealing with infrastructure that's above ground or on the ground, on the surface. Yeah, it's a different skill set. I think that's one where they're going to have to rapidly move into and understand. They'll be drawing on the supply chain to provide that experience and knowledge. So yes, they're much better at dealing with pipes buried under the ground. However, that's certainly while retaining the pipes in the ground and maximising the benefit from them, they have to look at other solutions, and the green-blue area is certainly where they're going to have to increase that skill set. And I'm on that learning curve as well, in terms of learning how to design, develop, utilise nature-based solutions. Yeah, so that's certainly, I'm on that same learning curve.
Okay, we'll give you one final question, Peter, and then I'll let you go for your lunch, because I know those queues are quite a challenge.
Off by now.
Getting your lunch is a challenge at this festival.
It certainly is.
So the final question's from Harry Cattrall, and he says, will there be sufficient funding available for wastewater cleanup based on NIC figures. Water 25 billion, wastewater 50 billion. More spend forecasting wastewater, he says, as a question.
Well, yeah, there will be a significant uplift in expenditure on the wastewater sector. I think the challenge is, and we go back to the cost of living crisis for 10 years, 10 years, we've been trying to keep bills low, marginal increase. Now we're looking at a significant step change in terms of bill size. So that is going to be a problem because obviously the water companies are on the back foot. If you're increasing bills by 40% to cover some of these costs, yes, that's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be a difficult sell, I think. We will be seeing an increase in expenditure. Where that expenditure comes from, I think that's one for the politicians to decide and to determine. But not going to be an easy problem to solve. No, definitely not.
Okay, right. Okay, well, thank you very much, Peter. It's been a very interesting presentation, and I think it's brought to everybody's minds the sort of challenges that are there in terms of solving this problem. For me, I'm with you on the fact that yes, the water companies do have spillages, but there's a bigger challenge in educating farmers and all other people who potentially pollute our waterways, and that's a big educational program that's required. So thank you all for attending this webinar. As I said at the beginning, if you are interested in the Pipeline Industries Guild or UKSTT, please visit the websites. That's pipeguild.com or ukstt.org.uk, and you'll be able to get further information about both organisations and our future programme of events. So thank you very much again for your time. And if you have any questions that you'd like to bring forward, then please send them to either Guild HQ or UKSTT HQ, and we'll ask Peter if he'll provide an answer for you. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Much appreciated. Cheers. Thank you.